Margaret Dawson was not the kind of person who liked to make a fuss. At 78 years old, she had lived a life full of quiet moments, simple joys, and hard-earned lessons. A retired schoolteacher, Margaret spent most of her days tending to her garden, reading books by the window, or volunteering at the local library. She didn't need much to be happy, just enough to keep her comfortable and independent. But lately, one thing had been on her mind: buying a new car. Her old sedan, a trusty vehicle that had served her well for over 15 years, was starting to show its age. The engine rattled when she turned the key, the air conditioning no longer worked, and the seats creaked every time she sat down. Margaret knew it wouldn't last much longer, so she decided it was time to replace it with something reliable but affordable. It wasn't a decision she took lightly. After all, she had saved carefully for years and wanted to make sure she made the right choice. On a bright Tuesday morning, Margaret, dressed in her favorite navy blue cardigan and pressed slacks, slipped on her sensible shoes and grabbed her handbag before heading out the door. She drove her aging sedan to Prestige Motors, a dealership about 10 minutes from her house. From what she'd seen in advertisements, they offered a wide range of vehicles, including models suitable for someone like her, practical, safe, and within her budget. As she pulled into the parking lot, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Buying a car wasn't something she did often, and she hoped the process would go smoothly. The showroom at Prestige Motors gleamed under the sunlight streaming through large glass windows. Rows of shiny cars were displayed inside, each one polished to perfection. Salespeople in crisp uniforms moved around, chatting with customers or typing on their tablets. Margaret stepped out of her car, feeling slightly out of place among the sleek luxury vehicles and expensive suits. Still, she reminded herself why she was there: to find a dependable car that fit her needs, and walked toward the entrance with determination. As soon as she entered the showroom, a young man approached her with a smile. His name tag read Kevin. He greeted her politely, asking if he could assist her. Margaret nodded and explained that she was looking for a small sedan, preferably one with good gas mileage and easy-to-use features. Kevin listened attentively for a moment, nodding along as though he understood her requirements. However, his expression changed subtly when he glanced at her outfit and noticed her worn handbag. Suddenly his tone shifted ever so slightly, becoming less enthusiastic. "Well, Mrs." Kevin trailed off, waiting for her to fill in the blank. "Dawson," Margaret replied warmly. "Margaret Dawson." "Right, Mrs. Dawson," Kevin said, forcing another smile. "Let me show you some options we have here." Instead of leading her to the section of sedans she'd requested, Kevin guided her past rows of high-end sports cars and SUVs, pointing out features she clearly didn't need. When Margaret gently reminded him that she was interested in something smaller and more practical, Kevin sighed audibly, as if her preferences were an inconvenience. "We do have a few compact models," he admitted grudgingly, finally steering her toward a corner of the showroom where older, less flashy cars were parked. Margaret's eyes lit up when she spotted a silver sedan with a sticker price well within her budget. It looked clean and sturdy, exactly what she had imagined. She asked Kevin if she could take it for a test drive. Kevin hesitated, tapping his pen against his clipboard. "A test drive? For this model?" He raised an eyebrow, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you sure you're ready to commit to something like this?" Margaret blinked, taken aback by his response. "I just want to see how it feels to drive," she explained patiently. "It's important to know if it's the right fit." Kevin shrugged, his impatience growing more obvious. "Look, these aren't exactly our top sellers. If you're serious about buying, I can give you some brochures, but honestly, I don't think it's worth my time or yours to go through the hassle of a test drive." His words stung, though Margaret tried not to let them show. She had always believed in treating others with kindness and respect, even when they didn't extend the same courtesy to her. But standing there, facing Kevin's dismissive attitude, she couldn't help but feel hurt. It was clear that he had judged her based on appearances alone, assuming she couldn't afford anything worthwhile. "I see," Margaret said softly, trying to mask her disappointment. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, clutching her handbag tightly as she made her way back to her old sedan. Once she was safely behind the wheel, she allowed herself a deep sigh. The experience had left a bitter taste in her mouth, but she told herself it wasn't worth dwelling on. There were other dealerships in town, and surely someone else would treat her with the dignity she deserved. Little did Margaret know, however, that her visit to Prestige Motors wasn't over, not by a long shot. What she didn't realize as she drove away was that her actions, or rather the reaction they provoked, would set off a chain of events that would change the dealership forever. All because of one phone call she planned to make later that evening. That evening, Margaret sat in her cozy living room sipping a cup of chamomile tea as she stared out the window. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Normally, this was her favorite time of day. Moment to relax after a long afternoon of gardening or reading. But tonight, her thoughts kept drifting back to the car dealership. She replayed the conversation with Kevin over and over in her mind, cringing at how dismissive he had been. It wasn't just about the car. It was the way he had looked at her, as if she didn't matter simply because of how she dressed or the kind of car she could afford. Margaret sighed and set her teacup down on the side table. She didn't like holding on to negative feelings. It wasn't in her nature, but the incident still bothered her more than she cared to admit. She decided to call her son Richard, not because she wanted him to fix anything, but because she needed someone to talk to. Richard was always good at listening, even when life got busy for him. He had a way of making her feel heard without judgment, something she appreciated deeply. Picking up the phone, Margaret dialed his number. After a few rings, Richard answered, his voice warm and familiar. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "Hello, sweetheart," Margaret replied, forcing a cheerful tone. "I'm fine. Just thought I'd check in." They exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes, talking about the weather and Richard's latest project at work. Margaret hesitated before bringing up the dealership, unsure if she should mention it at all. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Actually, there's something I wanted to tell you. It's not a big deal, but while I went to look at cars today." Richard perked up immediately. "Oh? How did it go? Did you find anything you liked?" Margaret hesitated again, fiddling with the edge of her sweater. "Well, yes and no. There was a car I thought might work, but..." She trailed off, unsure how to explain what happened next. "But what?" Richard asked, sensing there was more to the story. Margaret sighed softly. "The salesperson wasn't very nice. He seemed annoyed that I wanted to test drive a car I could actually afford. I guess he thought I was wasting his time." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Richard spoke again, his voice was quieter, sharper. "What do you mean, Mom? What exactly happened?" She recounted the entire experience, starting with how Kevin had ignored her requests and ending with his refusal to let her take the car for a test drive. As she spoke, she could hear Richard's breathing grow heavier, his frustration building with each word. By the time she finished, there was a long silence on the phone. "Mom," Richard finally said, his voice calm but firm, "you shouldn't have been treated like that. No one deserves to be dismissed like they don't matter." Margaret shrugged even though he couldn't see her. "It's all right, dear. These things happen sometimes. I'll just try another dealership tomorrow." "No," Richard interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This isn't all right. You deserve better than that." Margaret blinked, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "Richard, it's really not necessary to..." "I'm going to handle this," he said firmly. "Don't worry about it, okay? Just trust me." Before Margaret could respond, Richard ended the call. She stared at the phone for a moment, confused, but also touched by his protectiveness. She knew her son cared deeply about her, but she hadn't expected him to react so strongly. Still, she reminded herself that Richard often took charge when he felt someone close to him had been wronged. It was one of the qualities she admired most about him. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his home office, his fingers drumming against the desk as he processed what his mother had told him. His jaw tightened with anger, not just at the salesperson, but at the entire situation. He couldn't believe anyone would treat Margaret, the kindest, most selfless person he knew, with such disrespect. The fact that it had happened at a place of business made it even worse. Richard leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully about what to do next. He had built his billion-dollar empire from scratch, starting with nothing more than a laptop and a dream. Along the way, he had learned the value of hard work, integrity, and treating people with respect, lessons he credited largely to his mother. The idea that someone could judge her based on appearances infuriated him. An idea began to form in his mind, bold and decisive. If Prestige Motors thought they could mistreat customers like Margaret, then they deserved to learn a lesson. One they wouldn't soon forget. Richard reached for his phone and dialed his assistant, Sarah. "Sarah, I need you to get me everything you can on Prestige Motors," he instructed. "Ownership details, financial records, employee information, the works. And while you're at it, arrange a meeting with their owner first thing tomorrow morning." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Got it, Mr. Dawson. Anything else?" "Yes," Richard said, his voice steely. "Make sure my legal team is ready to draft purchase agreements. We're buying that dealership." On the other end of the line, Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. She knew better than to argue when Richard sounded like that. "Consider it done." As he hung up the phone, Richard allowed himself a small smile. He wasn't doing this out of spite or revenge. He genuinely believed in using his resources to make the world a better place. If taking over Prestige Motors meant ensuring that no one else would ever be treated the way Margaret had been, then it was worth every penny. The next morning, employees at Prestige Motors arrived to find a fleet of luxury cars parked outside the showroom. At first, they assumed it was a promotional event or perhaps a celebrity visiting the dealership. But when Richard Dawson stepped out of a sleek black sedan, flanked by lawyers and accountants, whispers began to spread among the staff. Who was this man, and why did he look so determined? Inside the showroom, Mr. Harold Green, the owner of Prestige Motors, was going over inventory reports when one of his employees approached him. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Says he wants to buy the dealership." Harold frowned, setting down his papers. "Buy the dealership? That's ridiculous. Tell him we're not for sale." But before the employee could respond, Richard appeared in the doorway, his presence commanding attention. "Mr. Green, I presume?" he said smoothly, extending a hand. Harold stood up, eyeing Richard warily. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you?" Richard wasted no time getting to the point. "I'd like to purchase Prestige Motors. Name your price." Harold blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, but we're not interested in selling. This business has been in my family for years." Richard nodded, unfazed. "I understand the sentimental value, but I assure you, my offer will be more than fair." He glanced at one of his lawyers, who handed him a document. Handing it to Harold, Richard added, "Take a look at this. It's non-negotiable, but I think you'll find it generous." Harold scanned the paperwork, his eyes widening as he realized the amount Richard was offering. It was far more than the dealership was worth, a sum that would secure his family's future for generations. Despite his initial reluctance, Harold found himself wavering. Business had been slow lately, and opportunities like this didn't come around often. After a long pause, Harold sighed. "All right, Mr. Dawson, you've got yourself a deal." Within hours, the transaction was complete. Richard now owned Prestige, Motors lock, stock, and barrel. Employees gathered in the showroom, murmuring nervously as rumors circulated about what this sudden change meant for their jobs and for the future of the dealership. For Richard, however, the real work was just beginning. The moment the deal was finalized, Richard Dawson wasted no time. He walked into the showroom of Prestige Motors with a calm but purposeful stride, his eyes scanning the room as employees exchanged nervous glances. Some whispered behind their hands, wondering what this billionaire stranger had planned for them. Others stood frozen, unsure whether to greet him or wait for instructions. The atmosphere was tense, like the calm before a storm. Richard stopped in the center of the showroom and turned to face the group. His expression was serious, but there was also a hint of determination in his eyes. "Everyone," he began, his voice clear and steady, "I want to thank you all for your hard work here at Prestige Motors, but I also need to be honest with you about why I bought this dealership." The room fell silent. No one dared to interrupt as Richard continued. "Yesterday, my mother came here looking for a car. She's a kind, humble woman who has spent her life helping others. Instead of being treated with respect, she was dismissed and humiliated by someone on your team. That's not acceptable, not here, not anywhere." A few employees shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Kevin, the salesperson who had spoken to Margaret, felt his stomach drop. He hadn't recognized Richard when he arrived earlier, but now it dawned on him that the man standing before them might have been talking about his encounter with the elderly woman. His palms grew sweaty as he tried to shrink back into the crowd, hoping not to be noticed. Richard paused, letting his words sink in. Then he softened his tone slightly. "This isn't just about my mother. It's about how we treat people. Every single person who walks through these doors. From today onward, customer service will be our top priority. If you can't treat everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of how they look or what they drive, then you don't belong here." The weight of his statement hung heavy in the air. Employees exchanged uneasy looks, some nodding slowly, while others looked down at their shoes. Richard wasn't yelling or making threats, but his message was clear. Things were going to change, and quickly. To demonstrate his commitment, Richard called out Lisa, a junior employee who had always been known for her friendly demeanor and willingness to help customers. She blinked in surprise when he mentioned her name, stepping forward hesitantly. "Lisa," Richard said, turning to her with a small smile, "I've heard great things about you. Starting today, you're the new manager of this dealership." Gasps rippled through the room. Lisa's cheeks flushed red as she stammered, "Me? Are you sure?" "I'm very sure," Richard replied firmly. "You understand the importance of treating people well, and that's exactly the kind of leadership this place needs. Congratulations." As Lisa stood there, still trying to process the unexpected promotion, Richard addressed the rest of the staff again. "Let me make one thing crystal clear. Anyone caught mistreating a customer, or even thinking about doing so, will be fired immediately. We're building a culture of respect and integrity here, and if you don't agree with that, there's the door." With those words, Richard signaled the beginning of a new era at Prestige Motors. For many employees, it was both exciting and intimidating. They knew they'd have to step up their game if they wanted to keep their jobs under this new ownership. But for Kevin, the day only got worse. Later that afternoon, Richard asked to speak with Kevin privately. When the two men sat down in a quiet corner of the showroom, Kevin couldn't meet Richard's gaze. He already knew what was coming, but hearing it aloud made it feel real and unbearable. "Kevin," Richard started, his voice cold and direct. "Do you remember an older woman who visited yesterday? She was asking about a sedan and wanted to take it for a test drive." Kevin swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, sir, I thought she wasn't serious about buying." Richard leaned forward slightly, his piercing eyes locking onto Kevin's. "That older woman is my mother, and let me tell you something. She doesn't need to prove herself to anyone, especially not someone like you. Your behavior was unacceptable, and frankly, I don't think you deserve to work here anymore." Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, he nodded silently, knowing there was no excuse for what he had done. Within minutes, he was packing up his belongings and leaving the dealership for good. Over the next few days, Richard implemented sweeping changes throughout the business. He redesigned the showroom to make it more welcoming, replacing the flashy displays with warm lighting and comfortable seating areas. He introduced training sessions focused on customer service, emphasizing empathy and professionalism. Employees were encouraged to ask questions, share ideas, and contribute to creating a positive environment for everyone. One of the biggest changes came in the form of pricing transparency. Richard eliminated hidden fees and confusing add-ons that often left customers feeling frustrated or misled. Every car on the lot now had a straightforward price tag, along with detailed information about its features and maintenance history. Customers could walk in, browse at their own pace, and leave feeling confident about their decisions. Word of these changes spread quickly. Local news outlets picked up the story of how a mysterious billionaire had taken over Prestige Motors and transformed it overnight. Social media buzzed with praise for the dealership's new approach, and soon, curious buyers began flocking to see what all the fuss was about. For Lisa, managing the dealership was both challenging and rewarding. At first, she worried she wouldn't live up to Richard's expectations, but his support gave her the confidence to lead. Under her guidance, the team worked together seamlessly, focusing on providing the best possible experience for every customer. Even longtime skeptics among the staff found themselves inspired by the shift in attitude. Richard stayed involved during the transition, checking in regularly to ensure everything was running smoothly. But he also made it clear that he trusted Lisa to handle day-to-day operations. His goal wasn't to micromanage, it was to set a standard, a reminder that success wasn't just about profits but about making a difference in people's lives. A week after the takeover, Margaret decided to visit the dealership again, not because she intended to buy a car, but because Richard insisted she see the transformation for herself. As she pulled into the parking lot, she noticed right away that something was different. The exterior of the building had been freshly painted, and colorful flowers lined the entrance. Inside, the showroom was bright and inviting, with employees greeting customers warmly. When Lisa spotted Margaret walking in, she hurried over with a wide smile. "Mrs. Dawson, welcome back. I'm Lisa, the new manager. Please, let me show you around." Margaret blinked in surprise, touched by the genuine warmth in Lisa's voice. "Thank you, dear. This place looks wonderful." Lisa guided Margaret through the showroom, pointing out the new features and explaining how the dealership operated now. Along the way, other employees greeted Margaret politely, offering her refreshments and answering her questions patiently. It was a stark contrast to her previous visit, and Margaret couldn't help but smile. As they reached the section where sedans were displayed, Margaret paused in front of the silver car she had admired before. "This is the one I liked last time," she said softly, running a hand along the hood. Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "It's a great choice. Would you like to take it for a test drive?" Margaret chuckled, shaking her head. "Oh no, I'm just here to look. But thank you for asking." After the tour, Lisa invited Margaret to sit down in the lounge area where Richard joined them shortly afterward. Seeing her son, Margaret raised an eyebrow playfully. "So, this is what you've been up to?" Richard grinned, sitting beside her. "What do you think, Mom? Do you approve?" Margaret looked around the bustling showroom, watching as customers chatted happily with employees. "It's beautiful, Richard. Truly. But I hope you didn't do all this just for me." Richard shook his head, his expression softening. "Not just for you, Mom. For everyone. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, no matter who they are or what they can afford. You taught me that." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes as she reached out to squeeze his hand. "Well, I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Very proud." And as mother and son sat together surrounded by the hum of activity and laughter, it was clear that Prestige Motors had become more than just a car dealership. It had become a symbol of redemption, compassion, and second chances. As weeks turned into months, Prestige Motors flourished under Richard Dawson's leadership. The changes he had implemented weren't just cosmetic, they were transformative. Customers noticed the difference immediately. Gone were the days of high-pressure sales tactics and confusing jargon. Instead, they were greeted with genuine smiles, clear explanations, and honest advice. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon the dealership became one of the most popular in town. Lisa, now fully settled into her role as manager, took great pride in leading the team. She worked tirelessly to ensure that every customer left feeling valued, whether they bought a car or simply came in for information. Her natural kindness and dedication inspired the staff, who began to mirror her approach. Even employees who had initially been skeptical about the changes found themselves embracing the new culture. They realized that treating people well wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. Margaret Dawson visited the dealership often, Not because she needed another car, but because she enjoyed seeing how much it had improved. Each time she walked through the doors, she was met with warmth and respect. Employees remembered her name and always made sure she felt welcome. Margaret loved chatting with Lisa and other staff members, sharing stories from her teaching days, or offering words of encouragement. In many ways, the dealership had become an extension of her family. Richard stayed involved, though he allowed Lisa and the team to handle most of the day-to-day operations. He visited occasionally, checking in on progress and offering guidance when needed. But his presence wasn't necessary to maintain the positive atmosphere. He had laid a strong foundation, and the staff carried it forward with enthusiasm. One sunny afternoon, a young couple walked into Prestige Motors holding hands nervously. They looked overwhelmed, glancing at the rows of cars with uncertainty. Lisa spotted them right away and approached with a friendly smile. "Hi there, welcome to Prestige Motors. How can I help you today?" The woman hesitated before speaking. "We're looking for a car, but we're not sure where to start. This is our first time buying one, and we don't have a lot to spend." Lisa nodded understandingly. "That's completely okay. Let's figure it out together. Do you have any specific needs? Like space for kids, gas mileage, or anything else?" The couple exchanged glances, relaxing slightly. Over the next hour, Lisa patiently guided them through their options, explaining each car's features without pushing them toward anything outside their budget. By the end of the visit, they drove away in a reliable compact sedan, beaming with excitement. It was moments like these that reminded Lisa why she loved her job. Stories like this became common at Prestige Motors. Families, students, retirees, all kinds of people found exactly what they needed without feeling pressured or judged. The dealership even started hosting events, such as free car maintenance workshops and community drives to raise funds for local charities. These efforts further cemented its reputation as a place that cared about more than just making sales. Despite the dealership's success, Richard couldn't shake off the memory of how his mother had been treated during her first visit. He thought about it often, especially late at night when the weight of responsibility felt heaviest. While he was proud of the changes he'd made, he knew there was still work to be done, not just at Prestige Motors but in the broader world of business. One evening, after closing up the showroom, Richard sat down with Margaret over dinner. They talked about everything from gardening tips to upcoming holidays, but eventually the conversation turned serious. "Mom," Richard said, setting his fork aside, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened here, about how you were treated." Margaret tilted her head, studying him curiously. "You've already done so much, Richard. What more could you possibly want to do?" "It's not enough," Richard replied firmly. "Buying the dealership and fixing it was a start, but I want to make sure something like that never happens again to anyone, not just here but everywhere." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to do that?" Richard leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with ideas. "I'm going to start a foundation, something focused on promoting kindness and respect in workplaces. We'll provide training programs, resources, and support for businesses that want to create better environments for their employees and customers." Margaret smiled softly, her eyes shining with pride. "That sounds wonderful, dear. But remember, true kindness comes from the heart. You can't force it. It has to be genuine." "I know, Mom," Richard said, nodding. "But sometimes people need a little reminder of what really matters. If we can inspire even a few companies to treat people better, it'll be worth it." Margaret reached across the table to pat his hand. "Then I believe in you. Just don't forget to take care of yourself while you're changing the world." True to his word, Richard launched the Dawson Foundation within a few months. The initiative gained attention quickly, drawing praise from business leaders and community members alike. Companies across the country began reaching out, eager to participate in the training programs and adopt the principles Richard advocated. The Foundation's mission resonated deeply with many, sparking conversations about workplace ethics and compassion. At Prestige Motors, the impact of Richard's vision continued to grow. Employees felt empowered to speak up if they noticed unfair treatment, knowing they had the full support of management. Customers appreciated the transparency and care they received, often leaving glowing reviews online. The dealership became a model for others to follow, a testament to the power of humility and empathy. Lisa thrived in her role as manager, constantly finding new ways to improve the customer experience. She introduced personalized thank you notes for buyers, hosted monthly appreciation events for staff, and encouraged open communication between teams. Under her leadership, Prestige Motors didn't just survive, it thrived. Even Kevin, the former salesperson, heard about the changes from afar. Though he regretted his actions, he also understood why he had been let go. He enrolled in a course on customer service, determined to learn from his mistakes. Months later, he applied for a position at a different dealership, vowing to treat every customer with the respect they deserved. For Margaret, life returned to its peaceful rhythm, though she remained closely connected to the dealership. She, visited often, bringing homemade cookies for the staff or simply sitting in the lounge to chat with customers. Everyone adored her, and she loved being part of the Prestige Motors family. Occasionally, she would catch Richard watching her with a thoughtful expression, as if marveling at the ripple effect of her quiet strength. "You've done amazing things, Richard," she told him one day, as they strolled through the showroom together. "But don't forget, none of this would have happened if you hadn't listened to me that night." Richard chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Months passed, and Prestige Motors continued to thrive under its new identity. The dealership had become more than just a place to buy cars. It was a symbol of kindness, respect, and second chances. People from all walks of life came not only for the vehicles but also for the experience. Word of mouth spread far beyond the town, drawing visitors from neighboring cities who wanted to see what made this dealership so special. Margaret Dawson remained a regular presence at Prestige Motors. She loved walking through the showroom, seeing how warmly customers were greeted and how patiently employees explained each car's features. Sometimes she would sit in the lounge area with a cup of coffee, observing the interactions between staff and buyers. It filled her heart with joy to know that her son's efforts had created such a positive environment. One day, as Margaret browsed the sedans on display, a young man approached her. He looked nervous, clutching a brochure tightly in his hands. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said hesitantly. "Are you Margaret Dawson?" She smiled kindly, nodding. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The young man shifted awkwardly, glancing around before speaking again. "I just wanted to say thank you. My family and I bought a car here last month, and we've never been treated so well anywhere else. We heard about what happened when you first visited, and, well, it's amazing how much things have changed because of you." Margaret blinked, touched by his words. "Oh, dear, I didn't do anything. It was my son Richard who made these changes happen." "But it started with you," the young man insisted. "If you hadn't come here, none of this would have happened. You're kind of like the reason everything is better now." Margaret chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I think you're giving me too much credit. But thank you for your kind words. That means a lot." The encounter stayed with her throughout the day. As she drove home, she thought about how small actions could lead to big changes. Her visit to the dealership had seemed insignificant at the time, yet it had sparked a chain reaction that transformed an entire business and touched countless lives. She felt grateful, not just for her son's determination, but for the reminder that even ordinary people could make a difference. Meanwhile, Richard Dawson was busier than ever. The Dawson Foundation had grown rapidly, attracting attention from businesses across the country. Companies eager to improve their workplace culture signed up for training programs, workshops, and consultations. Richard traveled frequently, sharing his vision of compassion and integrity with audiences large and small. Despite his demanding schedule, he always found time to check in on Prestige Motors, ensuring that the values he championed were being upheld. During one of his visits, Richard pulled Lisa aside for a private conversation. "How are things going?" he asked, sipping a cup of coffee in the manager's office. Lisa grinned, leaning back in her chair. "Things are great. Sales are up, customer satisfaction is through the roof, and the team is happier than ever. Honestly, I couldn't ask for More. Richard nodded approvingly. That's good to hear. I'm really proud of what you've done here, Lisa. You've taken everything we talked about and made it your own. Lisa blushed, waving off the compliment. It's easy when everyone believes in the mission. And honestly, having you trust me to lead has made all the difference. Richard smiled, but his expression turned thoughtful. There's something else I've been thinking about. Something bigger. Oh? Lisa raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I want to expand the foundation's reach, Richard explained, not just to other businesses but to schools, hospitals, anywhere people interact with each other. If we can teach empathy and respect early on, imagine how much better the world could be. Lisa's eyes widened. That's ambitious. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you. Richard laughed softly. We'll see. For now, let's focus on keeping Prestige Motors running smoothly. This place is still the heart of everything we're trying to achieve. Back at home, Margaret often reflected on how much her life and Richard's had changed since that fateful day at the dealership. She was proud of her son, not just for his success, but for the way he used it to help others. Yet she couldn't help but worry sometimes. Richard worked long hours, rarely taking breaks or slowing down. She knew he thrived on challenges, but she also feared he might burn himself out. One evening after dinner, Margaret decided to broach the subject. Richard, she began gently, you've accomplished so much lately, but I wonder, are you taking care of yourself? You seem so busy all the time. Richard sighed, setting his fork down. I know, Mom. It's hard to step away sometimes. There's always another project, another idea, but I promise I'm okay. Margaret reached across the table, placing a hand over his. You don't have to prove anything to me, sweetheart. I'm already proud of you. Just remember, it's important to rest too. Kindness starts with taking care of yourself. Her words lingered in Richard's mind long after their conversation ended. He realized she was right. He couldn't pour from an empty cup. Over the next few weeks, he began scheduling short breaks into his routine, making time for walks, reading, and spending quiet evenings at home. Slowly but surely, he found balance, reminding himself that true leadership wasn't about doing everything alone but inspiring others to carry the torch. As the months went by, Prestige Motors became a cornerstone of the community. The dealership hosted events like charity drives, free car safety checks for seniors, and holiday toy collections for children in need. Employees volunteered enthusiastically, finding fulfillment in giving back. Customers joined in too, donating items or spreading the word about upcoming initiatives. What had once been a simple car dealership had evolved into a hub of connection and goodwill. Lisa played a key role in organizing these efforts, working closely with local nonprofits and community leaders. She loved seeing how the dealership brought people together, creating bonds that extended beyond transactions. One particularly memorable event was a family fun day, where families gathered for games, food trucks, and test drives. Children ran around laughing while parents chatted with staff members, learning about cars in a relaxed setting. It was a perfect example of how Prestige Motors had redefined what a business could be. Even Kevin, the former salesperson, found redemption in unexpected ways. After completing his customer service course, he applied for a job at a smaller dealership in a nearby town. Though hesitant at first, he quickly proved himself by treating every customer with genuine care and respect. When news of his transformation reached Prestige Motors, Lisa shared it with the team during a meeting. This is proof that everyone deserves a second chance, she said. Let's keep leading by example. For Margaret, watching these changes unfold was deeply rewarding. She often reminded herself that life was full of surprises, some good and some bad. Her own experience at Prestige Motors had taught her that setbacks could lead to growth, if you approached them with an open heart. She cherished the moments she spent with Richard, Lisa, and the rest of the team, knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. One crisp autumn morning, as Margaret strolled through the dealership's parking lot, she paused to admire the colorful leaves swirling in the breeze. A group of employees waved to her from the entrance, inviting her inside for coffee. Smiling, she walked toward them, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought her here. Little did she know, The story of Prestige Motors, and the ripple effect of kindness it inspired, was only beginning. As the years passed, Prestige Motors became more than just a successful business, it became a legacy. The dealership wasn't known for its flashy cars or high sales numbers, but for the values it represented: kindness, respect, and integrity. People from all over the country visited not only to buy vehicles, but also to witness firsthand what made this place so unique. News outlets wrote stories about it, calling it a model for how businesses should operate. For Richard Dawson, seeing his vision come to life was deeply fulfilling, but he knew the real credit belonged to the people who brought it to life every day. Lisa continued to shine as the manager of Prestige Motors. Her leadership style was warm yet firm, earning her the trust and admiration of both employees and customers. She had a way of making everyone feel valued, whether it was a nervous first-time buyer or a seasoned staff member struggling with a tough day. Under her guidance, the dealership maintained its reputation for excellence while constantly finding new ways to give back to the community. Lisa often joked that she never imagined she'd be running such a well-known business when she started as a junior employee. But deep down, she knew she had earned her place. Margaret Dawson remained a beloved figure at the dealership. Though she no longer visited as often as she used to, her presence was still felt. Employees fondly referred to her as the heart of Prestige Motors, knowing that her initial visit and the changes it inspired had shaped everything they stood for. Whenever she did stop by, Margaret would bring homemade treats for the staff or spend time chatting with customers. She loved hearing their stories and watching how the dealership had become a part of their lives in meaningful ways. One summer afternoon, Richard decided to host a special event at Prestige Motors to celebrate its transformation over the years. He invited employees, customers, local leaders, and members of the community to join him for an evening of food, music, and reflection. The parking lot was transformed into a lively gathering space, with twinkling lights strung between poles and tables set up for guests to enjoy. It was a chance to thank everyone who had contributed to the dealership's success and to share his hopes for the future. As the sun began to set, Richard stepped onto a small stage set up near the entrance. Holding a microphone, he looked out at the crowd gathered before him. There were familiar faces everywhere, employees he had worked alongside, customers whose lives had been touched by the dealership, and friends who had supported him along the way. Margaret sat in the front row, smiling proudly as she watched her son take center stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Richard began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just a celebration of Prestige Motors. It's a celebration of what we've built together. When I took over this dealership, I didn't do it for profit or recognition. I did it because I wanted to create something my mother could be proud of." He paused, glancing at Margaret, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "But this place has grown into so much more than I ever imagined. It's proof that kindness matters, that treating people with respect isn't just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. And none of this would have been possible without each and every one of you." The crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as Richard continued. "We've accomplished incredible things here, but our work isn't done. There's always room to grow, to improve, and to make a bigger impact. That's why I'm announcing tonight that we're expanding our outreach programs. We'll be partnering with schools, hospitals, and organizations across the country to promote compassion and empathy, not just in business, but in every area of life." His words resonated deeply with those in attendance. Many nodded in agreement, while others wiped away tears. Lisa stood nearby, clapping enthusiastically, her heart swelling with pride. She knew Richard's vision extended far beyond the walls of the dealership, and she was honored to play a role in bringing it to life. After the speeches, the celebration continued with laughter, music, and shared memories. Guests mingled freely, exchanging stories about their experiences with Prestige Motors. One older couple approached Margaret, thanking her for inspiring the changes that had made their car-buying experience so positive. Another family introduced their children to Lisa, explaining how the dealership had helped them find a reliable vehicle during a difficult time. Each interaction reinforced the idea that Prestige Motors was more than just a business. It was a community, As the night drew to a close, Margaret found herself standing beside Richard, gazing out at the glowing lights and happy faces. "You've done something truly remarkable, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Richard smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We've done it together, Mom. None of this would have happened without you." Margaret shook her head, though her eyes sparkled with pride. "I may have planted the seed, but you're the one who nurtured it into something extraordinary." They stood there quietly for a moment, taking in the scene before them. The dealership buzzed with energy, a testament to the power of kindness and determination. Margaret thought about how far they had come since that fateful day when she had walked into Prestige Motors feeling dismissed and humiliated. If someone had told her then that her experience would lead to such a profound transformation, she wouldn't have believed it. In the months that followed, Prestige Motors continued to thrive. Its reputation attracted top talent, eager to work in an environment where they could make a difference. Customers kept coming back, not just for the cars, but for the relationships they formed with the staff. Meanwhile, the Dawson Foundation expanded its reach, partnering with organizations nationwide to promote workplace ethics and compassion. Stories of change poured in, businesses adopting transparent practices, schools teaching empathy as part of their curriculum, hospitals prioritizing patient care above all else. For Richard, these developments were a dream come true. He had always believed in using his resources to create a better world, and now he saw that vision becoming reality. Yet he never lost sight of the lessons his mother had taught him. That true success wasn't measured in wealth or accolades, but in the lives you touched along the way. Margaret, too, found joy in the legacy they had created together. She spent her days gardening, volunteering, and occasionally visiting the dealership to see old friends. Though she preferred staying out of the spotlight, she couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment knowing that her quiet act of resilience had sparked such widespread change. Years later, when Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire community mourned her loss. Prestige Motors closed its doors for a day in her honor, hosting a memorial service attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Employees spoke of her warmth and wisdom. Customers shared stories of how she had brightened their days, and Richard delivered a heartfelt eulogy celebrating the woman who had inspired him to be the person he was today. "She taught me that kindness is a choice," Richard said, his voice trembling with emotion, "and that even the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. My mother may be gone, but her spirit will live on in everything we do here at Prestige Motors, through the foundation, and in the countless lives she influenced." As the crowd dispersed, many lingered in the showroom, reflecting on Margaret's legacy. They remembered her gentle smile, her unwavering strength, and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. Though she had never sought recognition, she had left an indelible mark on the world. And so Prestige Motors continued to stand as a beacon of hope and compassion, a reminder that even in moments of hardship, there is always the possibility for redemption, growth, and love.